The storm didn't announce itself with thunder. It came quietly, carried by a barefoot girl who refused to turn away. Behind those gates waited a creature no one dared touch, and a man who'd stopped believing in grace. What happened next made even the cruelest hearts go still. Like this video, subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. They called him Brutus the Devil behind steel bars, the dog no one could calm and no one dared to love. His cage stood at the edge of the Grant estate, a sprawling property in northern Texas, owned by Dr. Silas Grant, a black billionaire known as much for his genius as for his silence. To outsiders, Grant was an enigma, a man who built fortune from medical innovation and then vanished from public life after tragedy stripped his world bare. Inside his mansion, he lived alone with only the sound of his own footsteps and the soft hum of a life that refused to die. Outside, Brutus lived the same way. Their worlds were separate, but identical two souls behind invisible bars, breathing the same heavy air of survival. Brutus had once been a hero, a soldier's companion. Years ago, he served in Afghanistan beside Sergeant Luther Dean, a man who treated him not as property, but as brother in arms. Together, they crossed valleys filled with heat and fear, surviving ambushes and desert nights colder than mercy. When gunfire came, Brutus didn't run. He lunged into chaos, dragging Dean from the dirt after an explosion ripped through their unit. He took 2 bullets and still didn't stop pulling until his handler was behind cover. But fate gave no reward for loyalty that pure. The second blast took Dean's life right in front of him. The medics found Brutus lying over the man's body, eyes open, unblinking, refusing to move even when ordered. He didn't eat for 3 days. He didn't bark for 6. When he finally did, it wasn't the bark of a dog. It was grief turned into sound. The military labeled him unstable. They retired him early, gave him to a private shelter where no one could reach him. That's where Silas found him. The man who once owned skyscrapers and satellites now spent his fortune saving lost animals. He didn't see Brutus as a danger. He saw himself. Silas Grant had lost his wife and daughter in a car crash on a rain-soaked freeway 5 years before. The papers said he'd survived by chance, but those who saw him afterward knew it wasn't survival, it was punishment. Since that day, he'd spoken little, laughed never, and lived surrounded by dogs as if trying to remember what unconditional love felt like. When he first stood before Brutus's cage, the two stared at each other for what felt like hours. Brutus growled low, not in threat, but in warning. "I know what you've lost." Silas didn't move. He simply nodded and said, "So do I." That was how the arrangement began. No trainers, no force, no demands. Just 2 broken creatures pacing opposite sides of the same fence. Rumors soon spread that Dr. Grant had lost his mind. The man's offering $1 million to anyone who can calm that dog, one of his old business partners told the press. He's trying to buy peace like it's another patent. But those who worked at the estate knew better. The offer wasn't a game. It was a prayer. Silas wasn't seeking a miracle for the dog. He was searching for proof that healing was still possible for either of them. Every few weeks, another professional came. Trainers with fancy credentials, experts in canine behavior, even a former Navy K-9 officer, all failed. Brutus tore sleeves, snapped leashes, and once even dented a metal gate with his weight. After each attempt, Silas would simply say, "You can't reach him with fear. He's already lived through worse." The staff avoided the training yard after dusk. They said Brutus's eyes glowed like dying coals when the floodlights hit them. But Silas often sat outside that cage long after midnight, cane resting across his knees, whispering things no one else could hear. Sometimes he would talk about his daughter, how she loved dogs, how she used to braid ribbons into their collars. Once, he even laughed softly to himself, remembering how she tried to feed a Rottweiler cereal and called it dog soup. For a heartbeat, he wasn't the billionaire recluse. He was just a father remembering what warmth felt like. And maybe Brutus sensed that, because on those nights, he wouldn't growl. He'd sit down quietly, watching the man with the kind of silence that says, "I remember too." The world outside called it obsession, but Silas knew it was survival. He and Brutus were reflections, both punished for their loyalty, both haunted by ghosts they couldn't bury. And though he had more money than any man needed, he'd trade it all just to hear laughter echo through the halls again. The offer of $1 million became a challenge that fascinated the press. Television crews tried to sneak onto the property. Drone footage appeared online showing the monster dog pacing his pen. They didn't understand that this wasn't spectacle. It was pain broadcasted without consent. Yet, for all the noise, nothing changed. No one succeeded. The offer stayed on the table, gathering dust like the untouched piano in Silas's study. The only sound that truly mattered was the deep rumble of Brutus's breathing through the bars. And then one autumn morning, something unusual happened. As Silas stood by the window overlooking the yard, a gust of wind lifted a fallen photograph from his desk. It landed by his feet face down. He bent slowly, joints aching, and turned it over. It was his daughter smiling in her school uniform, holding a scruffy brown mutt she'd rescued from a gas station. Written on the back in her handwriting were the words, "He wasn't bad, Daddy. He was just scared." Silas froze. The Grant estate stood on the outskirts of Dallas like a monument to grief. Its sprawling acres, once trimmed by caretakers and bright with magnolias, now carried the stillness of a mausoleum. The main house, 3 stories of stone and glass, overlooked an empty lake that used to host summer picnics for the local orphanage. Now the dock was rotted, the waterline low, and the laughter that once filled the air had become only the echo of memory. Inside, Dr. Silas Grant moved like a shadow through his own home. He was a tall man, built strong in his youth, but time and sorrow had hollowed him into something quieter. His once dark hair was now salt and silver, his gait slowed by a limp from the accident that took his family. Each morning began the same, a cup of black coffee untouched on the counter, the low hum of classical music filling the silence, and the rhythmic tap of his cane against the marble floor as he walked from his study to the window overlooking Brutus's cage. Some mornings he saw the dog pacing. Other mornings he saw himself. The two of them had become mirrors, different species, same loneliness. The staff avoided his presence, speaking in hushed tones whenever he entered a room. They respected him, feared him even, but none dared to ask what haunted him. They didn't need to. The mansion itself carried the answer. In the upstairs hall hung a family portrait, Silas with his late wife Camille and their daughter Nia. Camille's hand rested gently on his shoulder. Nia's small arms wrapped around a golden retriever with a red ribbon collar. The painting seemed to glow faintly in the evening light, but the eyes of the man in it, Silas's eyes, were the same ones he carried now, distant, watchful, full of promises he couldn't keep. When the crash happened 5 years ago, it wasn't just metal and glass that broke. It was faith. They said he survived because of his seatbelt, but Silas believed it was punishment that kept him alive. He was supposed to die with them, but instead he lived with their absence. That was why he built the sanctuary for lost dogs, hundreds of acres, fenced and quiet, far from the city where every rescued animal could roam freely except one. Brutus. The dog remained caged, not because Silas wanted him trapped, but because Brutus refused the world. He wouldn't eat from anyone's hand but Silas's. He wouldn't lie down, wouldn't play, wouldn't bark at commands. Only at night did he howl a long, drawn-out sound that carried across the lake like the cry of a ghost, remembering the warmth of a fire long gone. In the first months, Silas sat by that cage for hours, trying to talk to him. "You don't need to be afraid," he'd whisper. "No one here will hurt you." But fear wasn't what held Brutus back. It was loyalty. Once a heart learns to give everything, it forgets how to accept anything less. Silas knew that too well. On his desk sat a small box containing a burned collar. The metal tag was twisted, the leather cracked from heat. The engraving read, "Loyal even when it hurts." It had belonged to Duke, the family's retriever, who had died trying to pull Camille and Nia from the car wreck. The rescue team found Duke wedged beneath the driver's seat, burned, but shielding them until his last breath. Silas couldn't bring himself to bury the collar. Instead, he kept it beside Brutus's adoption papers, as if to remind himself that loyalty was both salvation and curse. That was the morning he made the decision. He gathered the household staff in the foyer and spoke the words that would make national headlines: $1 million to anyone who can make Brutus calm again. The words dropped like stones into water, quiet at first, then rippling outward through gossip television and the cruel curiosity of strangers. Within days, applications poured in trainers, psychologists, self-proclaimed dog whisperers. Silas read every letter. Most were greedy. A few were hopeful, but none understood the task. This wasn't about obedience or skill. It was about the ache of two beings who'd forgotten how to trust. When the first trainer arrived, a man in his 40s with years of military K-9 experience, Silas watched from the balcony. The man carried a baton, spoke with command, treated the dog like an enemy that needed conquering. Brutus lunged, jaws snapping inches from the steel. The trainer stumbled back, cursing, and by the time the gate slammed shut, Silas had already turned away. "You can't command what's been broken," he murmured. Over the months, the estate became a revolving door for failed attempts. Each time, Silas's hope dimmed a little more. He stopped answering calls, stopped attending meetings for his foundation. He poured his energy into maintaining the estate instead, feeding the other dogs, repairing fences, trimming the rose bushes Nia once planted. But even the roses began to wilt, as if reflecting the owner's heart. Yet every night before he went to bed, he looked out the window toward the training yard, where Brutus lay curled in a corner, head resting on his paws, eyes open. It wasn't aggression Silas saw there. It was mourning. "We both lost our families," he said softly, once voice trembling in the dark. "We're just pretending we haven't." There were nights when thunder rolled through the plains and Silas would wake to Brutus barking into the storm, each sound sharp, defiant, echoing like an oath to the dead. He never silenced him. In the southern part of Dallas, far from the quiet roads leading to the Grant estate, the nights belonged to the sound of sirens, rusted shopping carts, and restless dreams. Beneath the flicker of a dying streetlight, 12-year-old Zaria Wynn lay curled beneath a cardboard sheet, her knees pressed to her chest for warmth. The wind cut through her thin sweatshirt, carrying the smell of gas and old fried oil from the corner diner that shut down 2 winters ago. Around her, the city was alive with indifference, passing cars that never slowed, footsteps that never stopped, and faces that looked through her as though she were invisible. Zaria had long since stopped asking for help. She had learned that pity was a short bridge, and people always pulled it up when you tried to cross. Once she'd had a family, her mother who worked double shifts at a laundromat, and a little brown mutt named Pebble who followed her everywhere. Pebble was the kind of dog that could make a child believe in magic. He had a crooked ear, one eye lighter than the other, and a tail that wagged even when there was no food to eat. He had been her protector, her secret, her only constant in a life that kept changing. But the day city control came through their block rounding up strays, Pebble was caught in one of those wire traps. Zaria had chased the truck until her lungs burned, screaming his name, but no one stopped. That was the first time she learned that love couldn't always be loud enough to save something. The next week, her mother got sick. The hospital bills came faster than the paychecks. And one night, while Zaria slept beside her mom's hospital cot, the machines went quiet and a nurse gently led her away. Since then, she had been running from the kind of silence that could break a person. For months, she drifted between shelters and alleys, living on half-eaten sandwiches and the kindness of strangers who never asked her name. When people asked what she was doing alone, she lied. She said she was waiting for her aunt, waiting for a ride, waiting for a door to open somewhere. But the truth was simpler and heavier. There was no one left to wait for. The city didn't notice one more lost child, but she noticed everything: the way the moon looked like a cracked bowl over the skyline, the way cold pavement could still hold the warmth of sunlight if you found the right spot, and how dogs, even the wild ones, never judged her when she shared her food. She talked to them sometimes, whispering secrets she'd never tell a human. They didn't answer, but they listened. At night before sleep, she'd pull the ragged blanket over her shoulders, close her eyes, and whisper, "Good night, Pebble," as if the little mutt were still lying beside her. She imagined him running free somewhere, tail wagging, no fences, no pain. It made her chest ache and comfort her at the same time. The city was cruel, but it hadn't stolen her tenderness. That was what made Zaria different. She still believed kindness mattered, even if no one returned it. One morning after a long night of rain, she woke shivering behind a gas station. Her stomach growled and her shoes squished when she moved. 2 truck drivers were standing near the pumps, laughing loud enough to drown out the wind. "You hear about that crazy rich guy?" one said, wiping his hands on a rag, "offering $1 million to anyone who can calm that devil dog of his." The other man snorted. "Brutus. Yeah, I read about it. That mutt's straight from hell. Tore a man's arm last year. No one's getting near him unless they got a death wish." The first driver chuckled. "Bet that old fool's losing it. Who throws $1 million at a monster?" Their laughter faded as they drove away, leaving the sound of the rain tapping against the metal awning. Zaria sat still, heart pounding. A dog no one could calm a man desperate enough to offer a fortune she didn't know why, but the words stayed in her mind like an echo she couldn't silence. She pulled her knees closer, staring into the puddle at her feet. The reflection staring back wasn't a child's face anymore. It was harder now, sharper, framed by dirt and determination. "Maybe he's not a monster," she whispered. "Maybe he's just scared." For the first time in weeks, she stood up with purpose. That night, she scavenged a few pieces of bread from a dumpster, wrapped them in a napkin, and tucked them inside her jacket pocket. It wasn't a plan, just a promise to herself, to Pebble, to every creature that had ever been thrown away. She didn't know where the grand estate was, only that it was far, but distance didn't frighten her. She had walked through worse things than miles. As the sun set behind the skyline, she began moving north, her shadow stretching long across the cracked sidewalks. Along the way, she passed a group of boys throwing stones at a stray. Without thinking, she shouted at them to stop. They laughed at her, but she stepped in front of the dog, anyway, hands clenched. The boys called her names and left. The stray ran off, limping but free. When they were gone, Zaria's heart was still racing, but she smiled faintly. "It's okay," she whispered into the empty street. "Nobody's gonna hurt you now." Hours later, she reached the edge of the city, where the streetlights ended and the road turned to dirt. The stars were faint above, half hidden by haze, but she felt them watching. Every step she took away from the noise of Dallas felt like a step towards something she didn't have a name for yet. Maybe hope. Maybe destiny. Maybe just the need to be seen by someone, even if that someone had fur and teeth. She thought about the man they'd mentioned, the billionaire with the haunted eyes. She didn't care about his money. The road stretched endlessly ahead, a ribbon of dirt and cracked asphalt winding through the dry Texas fields. Zaria Wynn walked with a slow, steady determination, her thin jacket clinging to her shoulders, her shoes torn at the toes. The bread she'd saved was wrapped carefully in an old napkin inside her pocket, growing harder with each passing hour. But she couldn't bring herself to eat it. It wasn't for her. It was for him, the dog she'd heard about in passing, the creature the world called a devil. Every step she took north felt heavier, but also more certain. Her hunger had stopped aching hours ago. All that remained was focus. She didn't know exactly where the Grand Estate was, only that it sat somewhere past the long stretches of farmland and gated communities where people like her were never meant to walk. She had been walking for nearly a day and night now, resting only when her knees gave out. The air smelled faintly of rain and cedar, and she wondered if that was what the dog smelled when he dreamed fresh air, open sky, no fences. As she trudged along the road, she replayed the words she'd overheard at the gas station. The men's laughter had stayed with her like a splinter under the skin. That monster don't need a leash, he needs a bullet. She clenched her fists at the memory. Pebble had been called a stray a mutt, a waste of city money. She had seen what people did to things they didn't understand. That's why she had to find him, not for the money, not even for safety, but because somewhere deep in her heart, she believed the dog was just like her. The world had misunderstood them both. The sun began to drop lower, washing the sky in streaks of orange and rose. She passed a small diner with a flickering open sign and peered through the window. Inside, families sat laughing, forks clinking against plates. For a second, her chest ached so much she thought she might fall apart right there. She hadn't heard laughter like that since her mother. Zaria pressed her hand to the glass, then turned away before anyone noticed her reflection. She continued walking until the light dimmed completely and the first stars came out. A coyote howled somewhere in the distance, but she didn't flinch. "Not tonight," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I'm not scared tonight." She found a patch of tall grass beside a fence and sat down, her legs trembling from exhaustion. Pulling her blanket from her pack, she wrapped it tight and looked up at the sky. The stars above her shimmered faintly, far away but clear. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Pebble, I think I found someone who needs me." Sleep came in fragments broken by the sound of cars and the cry of nightbirds. When she woke at dawn, the world was quiet again. The road ahead glowed pale under the first light. Zaria stood, brushed off her jeans, and started walking again. By midday, her stomach growled loudly enough to echo. She stopped by a creek, knelt to drink from the water, and saw her reflection rippling back at her eyes, tired skin smudged with dust, but burning with something fierce and alive. She smiled weakly. "Still here," she murmured. Somewhere nearby, a man in a pickup slowed down, watching her from the road. "You lost, kid," he shouted. She shook her head. "Just walking," she called back. He frowned. "Ain't nothing out here but fences and rich folks." "That's okay," she said. "I'm not looking for rich folks." He hesitated, then drove off, tires crunching gravel. Zaria waited until the sound faded, then crossed the ditch and kept moving. By late afternoon, the land began to change. Fewer houses, taller fences, trees manicured like statues. She could feel it now, the nearness of something big and unseen, like the calm before a storm. A gust of wind swept through the field, carrying with it the faint scent of something metallic, steel maybe, or iron gates. Her heart skipped. She knew she was close, but before she reached it, she heard voices. 2 groundskeepers stood by a fence smoking. "You hear what that fool girl did," one said. "Tried to get close to Brutus. Lasted 10 seconds before the guards dragged her out." "Guess that's what happens when people don't listen," the other muttered. "That dog ain't got no soul. Some things can't be fixed." "$1 million says otherwise," the first man laughed. "Maybe money can buy miracles." Zaria crouched low behind the shrubs, waiting until they left. When they were gone, she straightened fists balled tight. "They're wrong," she whispered. "He's not broken." She started walking faster now, her pace turning into a half run. Her breath came in short bursts, her heartbeat matching the rhythm of her steps. The road narrowed, twisting through oak trees, until she saw it, an enormous gate made of wrought iron, tall enough to block out the sun. 2 guards stood at its base, rifles slung across their shoulders, talking quietly. Zaria slowed. Her steps wiped the dust from her face and approached. One of the men spotted her immediately. "Hey, you lost kid." She shook her head. "I came to see the dog," she said, her voice steady. The guards exchanged glances before bursting into laughter. "You what I came to see, Brutus," she repeated. "I can help him." The older guard chuckled, shaking his head. "You're out of your mind, girl. That dog will tear you to pieces," maybe Zaria said softly, "but maybe he won't." The younger guard leaned forward, frowning. "You don't even look 12. Go home before you get hurt." "I don't have one," she said simply. Silence fell. For a moment, neither man knew what to say. Finally, the older guard sighed. "Look, kid, go on back down the road. There's a diner a few miles off. Someone might give you a meal." But Zaria didn't move. "I'm not leaving," she said. "Not until I see him." The guards exchanged uneasy looks, then turned their backs. "Suit yourself," one muttered, "but don't say we didn't warn you." The gate stayed closed, but Zaria walked right up to them, pressing her palms against the cold metal. Beyond the bars, she could see part of the estate, the wide field, the stone paths, and in the distance, a dark figure pacing back and forth inside a fenced yard. Her breath caught in her throat. It was him, Brutus. Even from far away, she could feel the weight of him, the stillness that made even the wind hesitate. The guards ignored her, thinking she'd leave once night came. The night pressed down heavy and long, wrapping the Grant estate in a silence thick enough to feel. Zaria Wynn lay curled beside the iron gate, her blanket damp from dew, her eyes half open but restless. The guards had stopped paying attention hours ago. One of them slept in the small security booth. The other stared at his phone, bored of the stubborn girl who refused to leave. The ground beneath her was cold, the kind of cold that seeped into bone, but she didn't move. Through the bars, she could just barely make out the lights of the mansion far in the distance and the faint shape of the training yard. Every once in a while, she heard the low, echoing growl of Brutus, deep warning alive. It didn't scare her. It sounded more like someone crying in a language only she could understand. She whispered to herself, "I'm here. You're not alone anymore." The wind stirred the tall grass, carrying her voice further than she knew. Hours passed, the moon sliding higher until it hung pale over the estate. Zaria reached into her pocket and pulled out the napkin-wrapped bread she'd been saving. She took a small bite, then set the rest beside her on the dirt, as if offering it to the night itself. Hunger wasn't the worst pain she knew. Loneliness was. That's why she stayed. In the quiet, her thoughts drifted to her mother, her soft hums when she worked the way she'd sing old church hymns to Pebble when the dog trembled during storms. Without thinking, Zaria began humming one of those tunes, a gentle, wordless melody. Her voice was cracked from thirst, small but steady. The sound slipped through the bars and floated across the dark lawn like a thread of light. She didn't know that far across the field, a pair of eyes had lifted toward the sound. Brutus had been pacing for hours, restless as always. But when he heard the faint tune, something in his muscles stilled. His ears twitched. The melody was nothing like the harsh commands or angry shouts he'd learned to ignore. It was soft, low, almost like the heartbeat of something safe. For the first time in months, he didn't growl. He just listened. When the wind shifted again, the sound faded, but the stillness stayed. Brutus walked to the edge of his pen and lay down facing the gate, staring through the darkness. Inside the mansion, a motion sensor light blinked on in the hallway. Dr. Silas Grant stirred from his sleep, glancing at the clock on his nightstand. 3:22. He rubbed his temples, listening. No storm, no intruders. But something felt different, a presence he couldn't name. He stood, pulled his robe around him, and walked to the window overlooking the front gates. The estate stretched beneath him, quiet, silvered in moonlight. And there she was, small and unmoving, curled beside the iron bars like a lost bird, too tired to fly. He frowned, watching as she shifted in her sleep, her thin shoulders shivering. "Who are you?" he murmured. He thought of calling the guards to remove her, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she hadn't tried to sneak in. Maybe it was because she reminded him of the girl in the photo on his desk, his daughter Nia, the one who never got to grow up. He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "She'll leave by morning," he told himself, but the words didn't sound convincing. When dawn broke, the air was thick with mist. Zaria sat up stiff and cold, brushing dirt from her jeans. Her throat ached, her stomach growled, but her eyes were clear. She stood and pressed her fingers to the gate, staring through the fog toward the training yard. Somewhere out there, Brutus was awake. She could feel it. One of the guards spotted her and groaned. "You still here?" he muttered, stepping out of the booth. "Kid, go home. This isn't a playground." "I'm not going home," she said quietly. "I'm not leaving until I see him." "That's not gonna happen," the man replied. "Orders are orders. The boss doesn't let anyone near that dog." Zaria tilted her head slightly. "What if he lets me?" The guard laughed, shaking his head. "Sweetheart, the only thing that dog lets near him is his own shadow." The younger guard joined in, smirking. "You're tough, I'll give you that, but that thing's a killer. He doesn't care if you're brave or crazy. He'll tear you apart. He's not a thing," Zaria said firmly. "He's someone." The laughter died a little. The older guard sighed. "You talk like you know him." "I do," she said. "I just haven't met him yet." They looked at each other, unsure how to respond. Finally, the younger one shrugged. "Fine, suit yourself. Just don't cry when you realize he's not what you think." They turned away, muttering under their breath, but Zaria barely heard them. She was listening to something else, a faint shuffle from far beyond the yard. It was subtle, almost hidden by the morning breeze. She stepped closer to the bars, squinting into the fog. For a moment, she thought she imagined it, but then she saw it movement. A large shape standing still at the edge of the field, half shrouded in mist. Her heart raced. It was Brutus. His outline was massive against the pale light muscles, coiled ears alert. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other through the distance. She raised her hand slowly, fingers trembling not to wave, but to show she had nothing to hide. The dog didn't move. Then the wind shifted again, carrying the faint scent of the bread she'd left behind during the night. Brutus's nose lifted. He sniffed the air, then took a step closer to the fence that separated his pen from the rest of the property. The motion lights flickered on, revealing his scars, old wounds healed over, like memories that refused to fade. Zaria whispered, "Hi." Her voice barely reached him, but something about it made him lower his head, slightly curious but cautious. One of the guards noticed. "Hey, back off the gate," he barked, stepping forward, but Zaria didn't move. The sun climbed slow and pale through the mist, washing the Grant estate in gold and quiet. Zaria Wynn stood at the gate, her breath fogging in the morning chill, her hands gripping the bars as if holding on to her own faith. Behind her, the guards argued in low tones about what to do with her, but they didn't dare drag her away. Something about the dog's stillness unnerved them. Since dawn, Brutus hadn't moved from the edge of his yard. He sat watching the girl through the fog, ears tilted forward, eyes sharp but calm. The man inside the mansion, Dr. Silas Grant, hadn't slept either. He had spent the night pacing his study, the memory of that small girl by the gate gnawing at him like an echo he couldn't shake. He didn't understand why he hadn't ordered the guards to send her away. Maybe it was because of the lullaby. Maybe it was because for the first time in years, the dog had been quiet. Now, as the light grew stronger, he made up his mind. He took his cane, descended the marble stairs, and stepped out into the cool air. The guard snapped to attention as he approached his silhouette cutting through the haze. "That's her?" he asked. The older guard nodded. "She's been here all night, sir. Says she won't leave until she sees the dog." Silas studied the child for a long moment. Her hair was tangled, her shoes worn thin, her face streaked with dirt, but her eyes were clear, steady, unafraid. He saw something in them that made him pause, not defiance, not desperation, but quiet conviction. "You came all this way to see Brutus?" he asked finally. Zaria nodded. "Yes, sir." "Why?" he said. "Because no one else could help him," she answered. "Maybe that's why I should try." Her voice was soft but sure, as if she had already accepted the danger. The guards exchanged nervous glances, waiting for the old man to laugh, to tell her to leave, but he didn't. He just looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. "You're not afraid of him." "I've been afraid before," she said simply. "It doesn't help." The air went still. Somewhere behind them, a crow cried, its wings slicing the silence. Silas tightened his grip on his cane. "What makes you think you can reach him when no one else has?" Zaria hesitated, then said, "Because broken things don't scare me." The words landed like a stone in water, quiet, but with ripples that reached places neither of them expected. For a moment, Silas forgot to breathe. He saw his daughter again standing by the kitchen door years ago, hands on her hips, saying the same thing when she brought home a one-eyed kitten. "Because broken things don't scare me, Daddy. They just need time." He looked away, swallowing the lump in his throat. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. "Do you even know what he's capable of?" "Yes," Zaria said. "But I also know what he's not doing. He's not attacking right now." She pointed toward the field. Brutus was still sitting there, motionless, except for the slow rise and fall of his chest. His gaze was fixed on them. Silas turned to see it for himself. The great dog's posture was relaxed, his head tilted slightly to one side, as though trying to understand what the humans were saying. "He's watching," Zaria whispered. "He's waiting for someone to stop being afraid of him." The guard stiffened when Brutus let out a low rumble, but Silas raised his hand. "Easy," he said quietly. Then turning to the girl, he asked, "You really think you can help him?" She nodded again. "If he lets me." The old man's jaw tightened. Years of grief and skepticism battled inside him. But something deeper, the faint pulse of belief he thought long dead, began to stir. He stared at the child, who spoke like someone who had already survived too much. "Who are you?" he asked. "Zaria," she said. "Zaria Wynn." The name meant nothing to him, but the sound of it settled heavy in the morning air. For a long while no one spoke. The only sound was the rustle of leaves and the faint hum of the generator by the guard post. Then from across the field, Brutus barked, once a deep, resonant sound that startled everyone. It wasn't the violent warning bark they knew. It was softer, almost like acknowledgement. Zaria turned her head, eyes wide. Silas's heart skipped. He knew that bark. It was the same sound Brutus had made the first night he brought him home, the sound he hadn't heard again since. He stared at the dog, then back at the girl. "He's calling you," he said almost to himself. The guards exchanged uneasy looks. "Sir," the older one said, "you're not really thinking of letting her near him, are you?" "That dog's a loaded gun." Silas didn't answer. His gaze stayed locked on the field, on the strange quiet that had settled over it. After what felt like an eternity, he said, "Open the gate." The guards froze. "Sir, that's open it," he repeated, sharper this time. The older guard hesitated, then obeyed, pressing the button that released the heavy iron lock. The gate creaked as it swung open, and the sound carried across the air like a verdict. Silas stepped forward, leaning on his cane. "You want to see him, Zaria?" She nodded. "Then be here at sunrise tomorrow," he said. "One chance. You do this under my rules and no one else interferes." Zaria blinked, uncertain she'd heard correctly. "You mean you'll let me try?" "No," Silas said softly. "He will." His eyes flicked toward the dog, who was still watching from the distance. The old man turned to the guards. "Make sure she has water, nothing else. She stays by the gate until morning. No one sends her away." The men exchanged looks of disbelief, but didn't argue. Silas turned to leave, pausing only once to glance back at the girl. "If you're still here when the sun comes up," he said, "you'll meet him." The following morning arrived with a stillness that seemed deliberate, as if the air itself was holding its breath. The fields around the Grant estate shimmered faintly under a blanket of mist, and the iron gate, once a barrier between two worlds, now stood open, just enough to let the girl through. Zaria Wynn stood barefoot on the damp grass, her worn shoes tied together and slung over her shoulder, her heartbeat steady but fast. Behind her, 2 guards and a handler watched nervously, ready to intervene. Dr. Silas Grant stood a few yards back, his cane pressed into the earth, his expression unreadable. The night before, he hadn't slept. He had spent hours wondering whether allowing this meeting was mercy or madness. But the image of Brutus sitting calmly through the girl's lullaby refused to leave his mind. There was something happening that logic couldn't explain, something that felt like the ghost of faith returning to a man who thought he had buried it. Zarya adjusted the strap of her backpack, eyes fixed on the training yard where Brutus waited. The dog was massive, his muscles rippling under his dark coat scars, tracing across his shoulder like lightning. Chains connected his collar to a post driven deep into the ground, not to restrain him, but to protect others from what he might do if startled. For a moment, no one moved. Even the birds seemed to hesitate before crossing the sky. Remember, one of the handlers whispered to Zarya, "No sudden movements, no eye contact, and if he lunges..." "I know," she said quietly. "Run." But she didn't plan on running. Silas's voice cut through the silence, calm and low. "You can stop any time, Miss Wynn. No one will think less of you." She turned toward him, her expression firm. "If I stop now, he'll think everyone was right about him." Then she stepped forward. Each footfall was deliberate, soft against the earth. Brutus watched her, his ears flattening his body, lowering slightly, a warning in motion. A deep growl rumbled from his chest, not a roar, but a vibration that traveled through the ground. The guard stiffened, one gripping the tranquilizer rifle slung across his shoulder, but Silas raised a hand, stopping him. Zarya didn't freeze. She kept walking until she was close enough to hear the sound of Brutus's breath. Her knees wobbled slightly, but her gaze never wavered. She stopped 3 yards from him and lowered herself to the ground, crossing her legs and resting her hands on her knees. The dog's growl deepened his lips, curling back to reveal teeth yellowed from time. "You lost someone too, didn't you?" she whispered. The words carried lightly on the wind, small enough that they might have vanished if the world hadn't been so still. But Brutus heard. His ears twitched and his eyes narrowed. The tension in his body didn't vanish, but it faltered. For the first time, confusion softened the edge of his anger. Zarya's voice shook, but didn't break. "You keep waiting for them to come back, don't you? The one who promised you'd never be alone." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "Me too." A faint tremor passed through the dog's body, subtle but visible to the ones watching. The guards exchanged worried looks, but Silas's attention stayed fixed on the scene, his knuckles white around the head of his cane. Zarya lowered her gaze, not as submission, but as respect. She reached slowly into her backpack, pulling out the small, napkin-wrapped piece of bread she'd carried since the gas station. Her movements were slow, deliberate, unthreatening. She placed it on the grass a few feet in front of her, then withdrew her hand. "It's okay," she murmured. "You don't have to take it now. I just wanted you to know it's here." Brutus's nostrils flared. He sniffed the air, but his paws stayed rooted. His breathing grew slower, the growl fading to a low hum, the kind of sound that came from instinct rather than fury. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time lost its meaning. The breeze shifted, carrying her scent toward him, a mix of dust, rain, and something faintly sweet, like the bread itself. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. Zarya didn't move. She kept her eyes lowered, her breathing calm the same way she had calmed stray dogs in alleys years ago. She didn't try to win his trust. She simply waited. In the mansion, Silas's heart pounded. He'd seen professional trainers fail within seconds, men with decades of experience reduced to fear. But this girl, small and barefoot, radiated a calm so pure it unsettled him. "She's not controlling him," he whispered under his breath. "She's forgiving him." The handler beside him shook his head in disbelief. No one's ever lasted this long. The moment stretched. A dragonfly landed briefly on the edge of Zarya's knee before darting off. Brutus's eyes followed it, then returned to her. His tail twitched once. It was barely a movement, but to Silas it was a miracle. Zarya whispered again, You don't have to guard yourself anymore. You did your job. You kept your promise. Brutus's ears flicked back. Something deep inside him, buried under layers of trauma and obedience, seemed to stir. The chain clinked softly as he shifted his weight. His head lowered until it was level with hers. Zarya finally looked up, meeting his gaze. For a second, everything stopped: the wind, the noise, even the guards breathing. The world existed only between the two of them. The handler whispered, "She's too close." But Silas said nothing. He knew that pulling her away now would break something fragile being born. Brutus let out another sound, but this one wasn't a growl. It was a sigh, a deep, weary sound that spoke of exhaustion rather than threat. Slowly, he lowered himself into a sitting position, muscles still tense but no longer coiled for attack. The guards stared in disbelief. He sat. One whispered, "He's never done that before." Zarya smiled, faintly, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, as if he had just agreed to something sacred. From the edge of the field, Silas took a step forward, his voice low and trembling. "In all my years with him, he's never..." He stopped himself, emotion tightening his throat. He looked at the girl again, small but unshaken. "How did you do that?" Zarya wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. "I didn't," she said softly. "He did." The air hung heavy with anticipation, so still that even the sound of a heartbeat might have echoed. The sun had risen fully now, painting the training yard in warm gold, but the warmth barely touched the chill in Zarya Wynn's trembling hands. She sat cross-legged a few feet from Brutus, the ground between them scattered with leaves and soft dust. Around the perimeter, the handlers, guards, and staff stood frozen in disbelief. No one dared move or speak for fear of breaking whatever invisible thread held the moment together. Brutus had stopped growling. He had stopped pacing. The beast who had mauled seasoned trainers and terrified entire crews now sat quietly, his breathing deep and steady. Every muscle in his body was tense, not from rage, but from confusion, as if part of him was trying to remember how stillness used to feel. Zarya's heart pounded hard against her ribs, but her eyes stayed fixed on him. She didn't see a monster. She saw a survivor, and something deep inside her told her that he could see the same in her. She swallowed hard, feeling the dryness in her throat. Slowly, she picked up the napkin-wrapped bread she had placed earlier. Her fingers shook slightly as she unwrapped it, the crust crumbling in her hands. She tore a small piece and laid it on the ground in front of her, the gesture simple, wordless, full of quiet trust. Brutus's nose twitched. His ears flicked forward, his eyes narrowing in wary focus. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then one paw shifted, pressing gently into the dirt, followed by another. The chain clinked softly as he leaned forward, muscles rippling beneath his coat. Zarya didn't breathe. She didn't blink. Her entire body went, still surrendering to the rhythm of the moment. The great shepherd lowered his head, sniffed the bread, and then slowly, almost reverently, took it between his teeth. He didn't snatch it. He didn't bite. He simply accepted it. The sound of the small crust breaking between his teeth carried farther than it should have. One of the handlers gasped quietly, and a few of the guards crossed themselves without realizing why. Zarya smiled, faintly, relief flooding through her veins like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Her chest loosened for the first time in days. "It's good, isn't it?" she whispered, her voice so low it trembled against the wind. Brutus's ears twitched again, his gaze shifting up to meet hers. His eyes, dark and piercing, held something new, uncertainty mixed with recognition. Zarya took a slow breath and did something no one dared to do before. She reached forward, her small hand trembling slightly as she extended it toward him, palm open, fingers soft and relaxed. The movement was slow, deliberate, each inch measured. Brutus's nostrils flared, catching her scent, the same one that had lingered through the fence the night before, the one that carried no threat, only warmth and exhaustion. The distance between them felt infinite and fragile. Another inch, another breath. Then her fingertips brushed against his muzzle. The world seemed to stop. No growl came, no snap of teeth. Brutus didn't flinch. His eyes softened the skin around his muzzle, twitching as if unused to such gentleness. His breath came slow and even, and Zaria could feel the warmth of it against her skin. A sound caught in her throat, a small involuntary laugh, half mixed with a sob. She ran her hand slowly down the bridge of his nose, her touch featherlight, but real. Behind them, someone whispered, "God above." Another guard murmured, "He's letting her touch him." From the terrace above, Dr. Silas Grant stood frozen watching. His heart hammered in his chest. His eyes blurred for a moment, not from sunlight, but from the emotion clawing its way up his throat. He gripped the railing, his knuckles white, as he whispered to himself, "She's not calming him. She's reminding him what love sounds like." Brutus shifted again, lowering his head fully now until it rested against Zaria's knee. His breathing deepened a steady rhythm that matched hers. The scars on his neck and shoulders glistened faintly in the light, like old stories that no longer needed to be told. Zaria ran her fingers gently through his fur, her touch tracing the ridges of healed wounds. She didn't pity him. She simply acknowledged them the way one survivor recognizes another. "You're okay," she said softly. "You don't have to fight anymore." The words reached him deeper than any command ever had. The dog exhaled, his body relaxing inch by inch, his head heavy against her leg. Around the yard, no one dared move. It was as if time had bowed in reverence. Silas took one step back, pressing his hand to his chest, as if steadying a heart that didn't know how to handle what it was feeling. For years he had lived behind walls built from grief and logic. For years he had told himself that love was something that could only end in loss. But as he watched this small girl cradle the head of a creature, everyone had feared something cracked inside him, a fracture of light through the darkness. He turned toward his staff, his voice quiet but steady. "Let them be." Then he walked back inside, every step slower than the one before, his mind full of memories he'd tried to bury. Upstairs, he went to his study and opened the drawer he hadn't touched in years. Inside lay a photograph, his wife Camille, his daughter Nia, and their golden retriever Duke. Nia's arm was around Duke's neck, and written in childish scrawl on the back were the words, "He listens when no one else does." Silas sat there for a long time, holding the photo, the sound of the wind drifting in through the open window. Down in the yard, Zaria kept stroking Brutus's fur, whispering quietly about things she'd never told another soul, about Pebble, about the night she lost her mother, about the way people look away when you need them most. Brutus didn't move. He just listened. And for the first time in her life, someone truly did. By the time the sun reached its peak over the Grant estate, the entire property had gone quiet. The rumor of what had just happened spread like a soft tremor through every worker, every guard, every hand that had ever feared the beast in the yard. Brutus, once the symbol of everything uncontrollable, now lay beside a 12-year-old girl, as though he had been waiting for her all his life. Dr. Silas Grant stood on the terrace for a long while, unmoving, his fingers pressed against the railing, watching the pair below with eyes that refused to blink. Every instinct inside him warred between disbelief and awe. He had seen men command armies and animals bend to fear, but this was something sacred, something untaught. Zaria sat quietly, one hand on Brutus's head, her thumb tracing slow circles through his fur. She didn't notice the guards backing away, didn't see the staff gathered at the edges of the yard, whispering in shock. Her focus was only on the creature beside her, on the rhythm of his breath syncing with hers. For the first time in months, Brutus's tail moved not a wag, but a single deliberate motion, a gesture of belonging. She smiled softly, tears drying against her cheeks. "You did it," she whispered. "You remembered." When Silas finally descended from the terrace, the air shifted. His cane tapped against the stone path, steady but heavy. The worker stepped aside as he approached, every eye on him, waiting for his judgment. He stopped a few feet from the girl and the dog. The scene looked almost unreal, the billionaire in his pressed shirt and worn shoes standing before the child who had slept by his gate, her clothes torn and her feet bare. "Miss Wynne," he said quietly, "you've done what no one else could." She looked up at him, squinting against the light. "I didn't do anything, sir," she said. "He just needed someone to stop yelling." A flicker of a smile touched Silas's lips, small but real. "You underestimate what that means." He motioned for his staff to keep their distance, then crouched slowly, his knee cracking as he lowered himself beside her. Brutus lifted his head, watching him, but didn't move to attack. His gaze was alert, protective, but calm. "He trusts you," Silas murmured. "That's something I thought I'd never see again." "He trusts you too," Zaria said softly. "He's just waiting for you to believe it." Silas looked at her truly, looked for the first time, and saw not a homeless child, but a mirror of everything he'd lost: innocence, weathered by pain, but still shining through. He cleared his throat and stood. "The $1 million is yours," he said simply. The guards exchanged startled glances, the air humming with disbelief. But Zaria shook her head almost instantly. "I don't want money," she said. Her voice cracked, but it was steady. "I just want a bed, and school, and maybe food every day. That's enough." The world seemed to pause around them. Silas blinked, uncertain he had heard her correctly. "You're turning down $1 million. "Yes, sir," she said. "I don't need it. I just want to stop being tired." The old man looked away, jaw tightening. Something inside him broke open quietly, painfully, beautifully. He turned his gaze toward Brutus, whose head rested against Zaria's knee once more, his eyes half closed in peace. "You'll stay here," Silas said, finally, his voice low but full of conviction. "We all need a place to heal." The words carried across the yard like a vow. The guards looked at each other, speechless. The handlers lowered their tools. The quiet of the estate shifted not in fear, but in something that felt dangerously close to hope. Zaria blinked, uncertain she had heard him right. "Stay," she repeated. "Here, here," he said. "In the main house. We'll arrange schooling, meals, clothes. You'll be safe." Her lips parted, but no sound came. The girl who had learned to survive every night by not expecting kindness suddenly didn't know what to do with it. Why, she asked softly. "Because you reminded me what kindness looks like," he said. His voice broke on the word. "And because I think he'd like you here." His hand gestured toward Brutus, whose ears perked at the tone-tail, giving another slow, approving motion. Zaria let out a shaky breath. For a moment, the weight of everything she'd carried, hunger, fear, grief, seemed to slide off her shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered. Silas nodded once. "No," he said. "Thank you." He turned and began walking back toward the house, his cane clicking softly against the stone. The crowd dispersed slowly, some shaking their heads, others smiling in disbelief. Zaria stayed where she was, her fingers still tangled in Brutus's fur. "We did it," she murmured. Brutus huffed softly, a low exhale that sounded almost like agreement. The sky above them had shifted to a brighter blue clouds, scattering the air lighter than before. For the first time in what felt like forever, the estate didn't feel haunted. It felt alive. Inside the mansion, Silas paused by the large portrait of his family hanging above the staircase. He looked at the faces he'd avoided for years, Camille's soft eyes, Nia's bright smile, Duke's loyal gaze, and whispered, "You can rest now. I think we found someone to carry it forward." He didn't realize tears had fallen until they touched the back of his hand. Later that afternoon, Zaria was brought inside. The house smelled faintly of cedar and old books, warm but unfamiliar. She walked slowly through the halls, Brutus padding behind her, his nails clicking softly on the polished floor. The staff stood watching, unsure what to say, unsure how to treat the girl who had just changed their master's life. Silas met them in the foyer, leaning on his cane. "Prepare a room for her," he said simply, "and make sure the dog stays near." The butler hesitated. "Sir, in the main house." In the main house, Silas repeated, and that ended the discussion. When Zaria entered the room prepared for her, she froze. It wasn't grand, not like the rest of the mansion, but it was soft and safe. A small bed covered in a cream blanket, a window overlooking the fields, and a wooden chest at the foot of the mattress. She stepped forward, her hand brushing the edge of the comforter. "It's real," she whispered, disbelief trembling in her tone. Brutus circled once, then lay down beside the bed, his head resting on his paws. The night in the Grant estate passed without thunder, without fear, only the soft rhythm of breathing that belonged to a girl and her dog sleeping in peace for the first time in their lives. The moon hung low above the fields, pouring silver light through the windows of the main house, tracing gentle shadows across the floorboards where Brutus lay curled outside Zaria Wynn's door. His chest rose and fell slowly, each breath deep, and even his mind free from the images that had haunted him for years, the screams of the fire, the sound of war. Inside, Zaria slept curled beneath her blanket, her face turned toward the faint light from the hall, one hand resting near the edge of the bed, as though reaching out to touch a presence that had never left her. The house, once hollow and cold, now breathed again. The portraits on the walls caught glimmers of dawn, and for the first time since his family's accident, Dr. Silas Grant didn't wake to silence. He woke to the sound of life. It wasn't laughter or music, it was simpler, quieter, something his broken heart almost didn't recognize at first. It was the sound of footsteps. He rose from bed, took his cane, and followed the faint tapping down the hall. When he turned the corner, he saw Brutus standing by Zaria's door, holding something in his mouth, her shoes. The sight made him stop. The massive German shepherd stood perfectly still, tail lowered, eyes soft, waiting. Silas remembered another morning long ago when Duke, his family's retriever, had carried Nia's slippers the same way, dropping them gently by her bed as she laughed and clapped her hands. He remembered how Duke used to do it every day until the accident, and now, after all these years, the gesture had returned through another dog who had once forgotten what love looked like. His throat tightened. Brutus stepped forward and placed the shoes neatly beside Zaria's bed, then backed away, lying down near the door. When the girl stirred, her eyes fluttered open, and she saw them there. For a moment she didn't understand, but when she met Brutus's gaze, she smiled through tears. "You brought them for me," she whispered, reaching to pat his head. He thumped his tail twice, slow and sure. She slipped on the shoes still damp from last night's dew and laughed softly. "Guess we're both house dogs now." Her laughter filled the hallway, small but real, and Silas felt something inside him break open, not from pain, but from relief. He stepped into the doorway, and Zaria looked up, startled, but he raised a hand gently. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, sir," she said. "Better than I ever have." "Good," he replied, smiling faintly. "Breakfast is ready downstairs, and afterward, we'll talk about school." She blinked, unsure she'd heard correctly. "School?" He nodded. "We'll enroll you in the district next week. I have already made the call." Her lips parted and she whispered, "Thank you, sir. I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Silas said. "Just live. That'll be enough." They shared a quiet look, an understanding deeper than words. Then Zaria turned to Brutus and grinned. "Come on, big guy. Let's go see what breakfast looks like when it's real." The dog stood and followed his steps, matching hers, his tail brushing lightly against her leg. Downstairs, the dining hall glowed with morning light. The table once set for one now had 3 plates. Silas sat at the head's area to his left, and Brutus lying at her feet. The staff, usually busy and silent, paused in the doorway to watch the strange but beautiful scene unfold. Zaria bowed her head for a moment before eating and whispering a small prayer under her breath, one of gratitude, not request. The meal was simple eggs, toast, fruit, but to her, it tasted like something sacred. Silas watched her eat, remembering all the mornings he had sat here alone, pretending to have an appetite. For the first time, he didn't have to pretend. When she finished, she looked up and said shyly, "You don't have to do all this for me, sir. I'm not doing it for you," he said, smiling. "I'm doing it for all of us." That afternoon, Zaria helped the gardener water the rose bushes that had once been Nia's. She hummed softly while Brutus followed close by his fur glistening under the sun. Silas watched from the balcony above his heart, both heavy and light. Every step she took across his land restored something he thought was gone forever. The estate no longer looked like a prison. It looked like a home. Later, when the sky began to dim with the gold of evening, Zaria sat with Silas on the back porch. Brutus lay between them, his head resting across both their feet. "Do you ever think people come into our lives for a reason?" she asked suddenly. Silas smiled faintly. "I used to," he said. "Then I stopped after my family died. I thought life was just chance and loss." He paused, his eyes glinting with emotion. "But now, maybe I was just waiting to be proven wrong." She nodded, looking out across the field. "I think Pebble sent me here," she said softly. "He used to find me when I was lost. Maybe he found me again." Silas turned toward her. "And I think Duke sent Brutus," he said quietly, "because no one ever really leaves when love stays behind." They sat in silence for a while, the breeze cool against their skin, the dog's steady breathing grounding them both. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang faintly through the valley. "You know, Silas said I spent years trying to buy peace. Money built these walls, but it couldn't fill them. You walked through my gate with nothing, and somehow brought everything I'd lost back with you." Zaria smiled, eyes glistening. "I didn't bring it," she said. "It was waiting for you the whole time." He chuckled, the sound rusty but genuine. "You're wise beyond your years, Miss Wynne." "I had to be," she replied. "The world doesn't wait for kids like me." He reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Well, this world does now." When the sun finally set, painting the sky in colors that looked almost like forgiveness, Silas stood and called Brutus softly. The dog rose and followed him toward the edge of the porch. "You saved us," Silas whispered, running his hand through the thick fur. "All three of us needed saving, and somehow you knew how." Brutus pressed his head into the man's palm, eyes closing. Silas felt the wet warmth of tears gather behind his own, but he didn't hold them back this time. "She didn't fix you," he murmured. "She fixed us." He turned back toward the house where Zaria waited by the door and smiled. "Let's go home," he said simply. That night, as the stars burned over the quiet estate, 3 hearts beat under one roof for the first time. A man who had lost faith, a girl who had found it in the ruins, and a dog whose loyalty had outlived everything else. The wind whispered through the field, soft and steady, carrying the last fragments of loneliness away. The Grant estate, once filled with echoes, now held laughter again. And though no one in the world knew their story, everyone who passed through those gates could feel it in the air. That healing isn't found in wealth or power, but in kindness given freely in second chances, accepted, and in the courage to love what others call unworthy. The end. If this story touched your heart, don't scroll past like this video and subscribe for more stories that remind us what kindness can heal. Tell us where you're watching from and drop a comment what part of this story moved you the most.